Hey there, welcome to episode 79 of the Quaggling Sand audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo. We're recording this at 8:20 in the morning on Wednesday, May 14th, 2025. The winds of allergy are blowing through Vegas, as is the case every year around this time. So we'll see we'll see how my voice goes through this. I gotta up my usage of that device I've mentioned previously. Maybe I'll talk about it in more detail on another episode. Anyway, we'll see if my voice holds up throughout this episode 79 as we talk about calendars. Yeah, they're those things that you sometimes find on a desk or a refrigerator or in your pocket. Calendars. Quaggling Sand, production by Street. Quaggling Sand is basically a solo audio essay program with that noise threw me a little bit, I guess. Audio essay channel, I guess, with episodes on various topics around various stories of events or happenings or tales, things I've learned, things I've come across over the years, many years. Today is a little bit of a straddling of old and new. Calendars and time are want to do that. If you are not familiar with the Quaggling Sand audio program, Quaggling Sand is, of course, a technical term that I coined when I was very young. I think somewhere under 5 years old. You, the layperson, may refer to this thing as pins and needles. It's the return of circulation to usually a limb. If you've been sitting on your foot or laying on your arm or various other variations of this, you will feel the sensation of pins and needles as circulation returns to that limb. Technically quaggling sand. Make a note of it, make use of it whenever and wherever you are. Hopefully, wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which includes show notes, the summary, which I will read to you, and 4 shameless self-promotion links. I should make that just one link that links to the shameless self-promotion links, maybe. Either way, we'll get through it. The summary of today's episode: in a world only more and more busy and even more noisy, the humble calendar seems like one of the most, if not the most, useful tools ever created to keep track of when. Do you use one? And if not, why not? Shameless self-promotion links. Part 1, buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo. It's a free-form profile page with links to my various audio programs, different projects on GitHub, actually organizations for projects on GitHub, some affiliate links for my favorite coffee beans, some other stuff. There is some biographical information at the top of the profile and a link to posts. So buy me the second shameless self-promotion link, buy me an update, linked in the posts section, buymeacoffee.com/danhugo/posts. It is a weekly 5 minutes or less microcast available exclusively on buymeacoffee.com. And it is a 5-minute, like I said, microcast updating you with a very quick rundown on the previous week's audio programming, any announcements and upcoming to start off your day on Monday, start off your week. Number 3, Dan's Ko-fi. I usually pronounce it Ko-fi to emphasize that it is ko-fi.com/Dan Hugo. In all cases, Dan Hugo, one word, no spaces, DANHUGO. Ko-fi.com is a little bit less like Buy Me a Coffee in this regard as far as shameless self-promotion, but I have recently been publishing a not scheduled, so just whenever, whatever the topic happens to be, audio program there called Coffee Solo, or Ko-fi Solo if you like. So that's ko-fi.com/Dan Hugo/posts. There is a pattern, at least. These are programs that can be recorded whenever. They'll be on whatever topic, any length. Could just be something I wanted to say. So another experiment, Coffee Solo, check it out. Now on with the show. In the beginning, it's a fine way to begin any story from the old days. From what I can remember, I have always been reasonably aware of dates as well as times. And you can listen to a previous episode of this very audio program about that. I think it's called About Time. With birthdays, various holidays, eventually school dates, when school starts, when school is in session, out of session, and so on. Somewhere in there, when my mom was going all in on various endeavors, work and whatnot, she acquired a medium size, and I think that was 8.5 by 5, like a half sheet of paper, sized day runner calendar organizer thing, my organizer. And I found it interesting to be able to keep track of so many things going on in a clear and consistent way in an all-in-one notebook of sorts. It was a little 6-ring binder. They had all sorts of accessories like a Ziploc bag to store stamps and coins, if you believe their advertising. A little 6-hole hole punch that would clip in there, all kinds of little doodads, good times, pre-printed forms, total nerd paradise. It could literally be one's pocket database of sorts. All kinds of stuff would end up in there. And if you wrote it in pen, you were expert. I started looking into this for real when I was in 7th grade, just becoming more aware of the potential to become more organized, if that makes sense. Kind of a little disclaimer of sorts. Nowadays, a large chunk of the population has a calendar in their pocket in the form of a mobile phone or tablet, or maybe a laptop, probably not in your pocket, and then anything that can access the internet, and so can take advantage of decades, literally decades of standardized calendar synchronizing and sharing across platforms and across time. I'm not always a pedantic user, and I have not been. Now, I've not always been emphatic about use of calendars, hence the title of this section. People have their own deals, and some workplaces were relying on Outlook calendars and email that integrated together. And so on occasion, I would receive an external calendar invitation for a meeting or some such, and how that would be handled on my side basically depended on where I was working and what they had set up as far as email clients and calendars and so on. And whether my workplace was making use of internal calendaring, again, it just depended. I didn't always work with people with so many things organized as such. I think perhaps because I was not always engaged with people in my own circles, I did not really press on the use of calendars. That is, people that I was engaging with in my own circles were not always into calendars. They were doing their own thing. I wasn't necessarily scheduling meetings with them. If we were at work, great. Otherwise, a lot more ad hoc. And usually it was a losing battle to try to make use of calendars, so you kind of give up at some point. Though I am going to guess here that nearly 100% of the time, using calendar software tools and platforms back then and over time would have made work life, I guess, a bit easier over these many decades. I would have to say my foray into food trucks, mobile vendors, really, with schedules and locations that were really calendarable events and should always be, drove my proactive interest and pursuits of really leveraging this long-established and standardized interoperable methodology. Since then, I have been keenly interested in leveraging the Humble calendar at scale. So really, I'm describing something that I'm kind of working on. I mean, there's a lot of things that I'm kind of working on, so I don't just pick one and say I'm working on it. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of moving parts. But this project has been inspired by a lifetime of some fascination with time and calendars. More so time, but over the years, the notion of calendar and calendar encompasses time as well. So calendar using standard, protocols and file formats and so on, it actually becomes possible to make use of this however long calendars have been around, the Mayan calendar, the calendars written on cave walls somewhere, I'm sure. These are all things that have been around forever, and we could make use of them, and technology has enabled that. It just boggles the mind that we don't more. So calendars at scale, what does that mean? So first of all, about those food trucks, I've spoken about this before in one way or another, and will likely do so again. The business of food trucks from any perspective is more interesting than you might think. It's not just a food truck that shows up on the same corner every day. It might be on a different corner, it might be a different food truck. In this context, imagine you worked in an office somewhere where a different food truck might be in a walkable parking lot each day, so easier to get to the food truck than to get in your car and drive somewhere. Imagine that you like food trucks and that you have at least one favorite. And imagine that you might go to other events out and about when you're not at work, for example, where food trucks might also be participating. So, for example, we have First Friday here in Vegas, and it's usually on a Friday, probably the first one each month. And that's just one of many potential examples. You might have your own examples. The list is vast. Based on my direct interactions with owners of food trucks, their customers, organizers of food truck and events that have food trucks, or food truck events and events that have food truck events, so to speak, and so on, the calendar is an absolutely valuable tool that could make a lot of communications work across the board. Communications work, not communications like tasks, but they would make the communication work better. How about that? across the board. But so few people take advantage of this cool potential, relying instead on tweets and Instagram posts and emails. The former two not always helpful thanks to algorithmic presentation. So like, how many times have I seen a post on social media about an upcoming event? Like, hey, come and see us tomorrow. The event was 2 days ago, but they're showing me after the event. And it doesn't help that some people monetize these sorts of things by creating a website that stands between the food truck and their customers, and you have to visit their website and so on. Use the tools. So the thing I began to pursue before my house fire and the big move to Vegas back in, the house fire was in April of 2013. The move was in July, same year. The notion of intersectional calendars. So what does that mean? In my example here, suppose there was a food truck calendar for your parking lot at work, a food truck calendar for each of your favorite food trucks individually, and food truck calendars for other events and venues. So First Friday, for example. You could subscribe to these calendars using your normal tools, Outlook, Google Calendar, Yahoo Calendar, Apple iCalendar, and the list goes on, and always know which food truck was scheduled for lunch at work, where your favorites are scheduled today or tomorrow or whenever, and which will be at First Friday next month. And that's if they schedule out that far. They usually do. For big events like that, you want to have 2-3 months of lead time, bookings. So there's a lot of lead time to get a spot there, and then you want to keep that spot. So you're probably going to be able to find out which of your favorites are going to be at First Friday or other events. And of course, food trucks are just an easy example because everybody knows what a food truck is at this point, and you know that they move around. And you have to look at the calendar and see where they are on a particular day, where you should. But do people support this? No, they'd rather you go to find us on Instagram. That's not useful. So in my travels, there are two kinds of people along this path, especially when I was working in the food truck space, and that's still on the back burner, so to speak. I really began to notice there are basically these two kinds of people when it comes to this sort of stuff. One group loves the whole idea of calendars and will make use of that, the calendar itself, and that add to calendar link that comes with some event emails or notifications. And then there are those who do not seem to want to make use of these tools, viewing them as confusing perhaps, or another thing to deal with. I get that a lot. And that's kind of ironic, perhaps. Calendars are complicated. Well, so is you forgetting and not showing up to meetings. I will comment on the add to calendar button versus calendar subscriptions in a moment, but for now, I think I was encountering more of the second group, so people that are confused or put off by calendars. I was engaging with more of that second group in my travels. Ironically, in the Silicon Valley region and time frame, that was the case. Maybe this was too early in the mobile phone era, so a lot of us were still using laptops and desktop computers. Certainly, mobile phones that had some sort of an internet connection were tricky. So calendaring on a phone, pre-internet connected phones, like a feature phone, like your Nokia or Ericsson device, probably clunky and difficult, and maybe even non-standard, required too much fiddling around to make it work. So we'll say probably it was the time and the technology on hand. But calendars tended to be accessed more often on the desktop or the laptop, and tended to be more work-oriented because you're probably at work when you're using this stuff. But generally speaking, the people who did not like the use of these tools were forced in work scenarios to do so. So they probably felt even less inclined to view them as a good thing in general. Like, we got to use that at work. I don't use calendars in real life. What are those good for? Bleh. People who do like these tools, though, have probably found the ever more widening use radius to be interesting. The notion of scheduling time for a meetup using tools like Calendly, and now many other similar tools. Some are open source, they're free, or they're more reasonably priced, so Calendly no longer has the lock on the marketplace. Now even Google makes a feature for business and nonprofit workspace accounts, for example. So I just started using Book Time with Dan on my Innovate for Vegas Foundation emails in case somebody wants to have a meeting. The notion of calendar subscriptions still needs some user interface work perhaps, but we have come a long way on a very old standard. A standard, by the way, that Apple has done quite a bit to make useful. So kudos to Apple. Apple mostly I don't like, but in this case, not so bad. The add to calendar. So there's a thing, a standard. It's not called this, but it describes the vCalendar, which is a text file or it can be expressed as a text file that describes a calendar. It's right there in the name. There is also a V card. If you think business card, you can figure that one out. If you have ever received an email with an event invitation or an event notification, there may be a file attached called maybe something like invite.ics, and that is an iCalendar stream, ICS, iCalendar stream. Text file, and if you were to look at this plain text file, you could see the vCalendar block of text with the details of the V, I think it stands for virtual, but V event, and they're inside that block of text. And you can probably figure out what a V event is. This is about as complicated as we're going to get in this episode. Basically, if I add an event to my calendar, I am adding a copy of this event to my own calendar, whichever it is. This is almost exactly the same as someone calling you or emailing you, giving you the time and place information for some event, and you writing it down in your calendar, maybe on a Post-it note or wherever. You may need to check for yourself if the event changes or it gets canceled or moves or whatever the case, but it is in your calendar for your use, or uses even. The other way to do this is to subscribe to the calendar you're interested in, which adds, a little typo here, adds has two D's in this case, which adds a server link to your own calendar server. So if you're using Google and they're using Google, or if you're using Microsoft and they're using Apple, or whatever the case, you, and maybe your workplace has a calendar server, if they're using like Exchange server or something better. Maybe your home installation, you have a server running in your home and you can manage your own calendar server there. Your server can ask that other server every once in a while. I think Google Calendar does it every once a day, I think, if any of the events on the subscribed calendar have changed. So you basically have your server look at the subscribed calendar server and say, oh, give me the current status of this calendar. And it'll send any updates and whatnot. And then your server will update your own calendar. So when you view your server with your client, and again, your server could be Google Calendar, could be Apple iCalendar, could be Microsoft Outlook, whatever. So when you open the application on your phone and you're looking at it, and you might see an event for the first Friday calendar, and you might look at it and say, this event has been canceled due to wind. This actually does happen, but because they don't use a calendar scheme like this, they have to post everywhere on social media and hope that people notice. Otherwise and people don't. So they show up and they're, this is annoying. But an event with a lot of tents, T-E-N-T, if you have a lot of tents and booths, and there's a lot of wind, which is the case here in Vegas, and we are in a windy season now. All the wind that affects First Friday usually gusts in like February. But whatever the case, whenever it is, if there is a heavy wind, it could blow all those tents away, and that's no fun. So they'll either have the people that are vending there remove the tents, so it's just the frame, or they'll cancel the event outright if it's too much possibility for damage or injury. You don't want to have a tent flying through the air hitting people. So if you can subscribe to these calendars and you always get an update when they change or if things are canceled or move, you are now aware and can consume this information the way that you want. You don't now have to visit websites or hope that social media is giving you the opportunity to find out if an event is canceled. You don't have to spend a lot of time tracking down something that is naturally a V event on a V calendar that you can subscribe to. So are you beginning to see the possibilities? The likes of Meetup, Eventbrite, LinkedIn, Facebook, and other criminals in this area. I don't mean actual crime, but it is crimes against calendars. Services that want to keep you coming back to try to sell you stuff based on your interest in a particular event and to generally track more of your data will provide some event and calendar infrastructure that will allow you to add event to your own calendar. But it is that first kind. You may or may not get notified of an event change. And if you do get notified, they may not be a part of the calendar infrastructure. You may receive a notification from Facebook or from Meetup or whatever, usually an email or some other notification on your phone that comes to you in this other channel, but it doesn't necessarily update your calendar. They could email you an updated calendar invite that you can add back to your calendar. I haven't done that in a while. I don't know if it overwrites it. Usually events have a universally unique ID, so it should be able to merge in the changes, but I guess, your mileage may vary. But if you use calendar infrastructure as it is, you can take care of this automatically. From an attendee point of view, this is useful, whether calendars are a part of life or not. Add the event to a calendar, make use of the emailed or other notifications from the platform, whether it's in your calendar or not. It may not make much of a difference to the casual fan of a particular event. For event organizers, though, this rapidly becomes frustrating and almost even untenable. If these are all specialized platforms, they may really want you, the organizer, to use their platform's interface to maintain your events, like canceling or moving the venue or whatever else. This may mean reviewing the same event across 2 or 5 or even 10, maybe even more of these platforms to make sure you are keeping your audience up to date. This could be a full-time job in itself. And not to mention, if I find your event on LinkedIn events for your business or whatever it is, and I also see it on Meetup, I may say, oh, I'm going to attend on LinkedIn. Oh, I'm going to join this event and attend on Meetup. So are 2 people attending or 1? I may not have the same username between them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it makes administering for the organizer something of a chore to have so many of these vertical silos. It's a problem that's been solved. So this idea came to me a while ago, inspired by the food truck idea I mentioned, having specific calendars, but using this calendar standard. The lack of awareness of how calendars could actually be used to make discovery and participation easier if people know how they worked could be interesting. Most people do not know how this works. So here in Vegas, Meetup is popular, as is Eventbrite, and the rest. I already mentioned them. But then some organizations only mention their community events on LinkedIn, which is a siloed community itself. So if I'm not following someone who's following your company page, or if I don't get the algorithm to show me an event, I may never know it's happening, which is silly. And there are still some other ways people publish events, including the city of Las Vegas itself, which has a residential events portal of sorts. And then you can add events to your calendar, but can I just subscribe to the entire calendar? Well, you can get an email, like a newsletter style notification. That's just another tool that doesn't work. You have to apply your own heuristics to adapt to your calendar workflow. Without extra effort to get these events out to the public, it can be a real challenge to find events of interest if you don't already know that you're interested and also know where to look. So why not use calendars? When you think about it, everything from road construction and detours that may impact your commute to school and or work, bus schedules and schedule changes, food truck schedules, of course, public events, local government, community engagement events, as I mentioned, and the list goes on and on and on, should really be all accessible on your terms. And if meetups for social and education and business development that are now appearing in Meetup and Eventbrite and so on can appear in the same ways, the users, that's us, can make use of this information in ways that we want to. I shouldn't have to go to meetup.com to figure out what's going on in my city, right? The organizer of the event should create a calendar in some place, Google, maybe even Meetup, maintain that calendar and publish it so that other calendar servers can subscribe to calendars so that I will always get updates and be aware of upcoming events and so on. What this does is give control and management capabilities, like how many people have RSVP'd. You should be able to find that information out as the organizer without visiting 10 different websites. You should be able to aggregate this information so you can plan your event, accommodate the people who are planning to attend. And then if you say, oh, we got to move the time by 30 minutes. Oh, we got to move the venue. We have to send everyone who's RSVP'd an email about parking. That is all kind of a part of the calendar infrastructure as it exists. But instead, you may have to send out a notice on LinkedIn and send out a different one on Meetup. The list goes on. This makes it more difficult to communicate with people in your small c communities, whether it's geographically local, people in a neighborhood, people that are all living in a city and who all could attend a government outreach event, et cetera, et cetera. So if you as an organizer could maintain a calendar, publish it so that others could subscribe to it, the value proposition is tremendous. The only problem is it leaves LinkedIn and Meetup and so on out of the loop. Or does it? All you really need to do is say, hey, Meetup, you can still be useful for discovery and for outreach, and you can be a premium member and all of the service ads that they do, service additions. But at the end of the day, they can publish the calendar as a official, standardized, CalDave compatible iCalendar stream format protocol. Well, CalDave is a protocol. Calendar streams are a file format, I guess you could say, or transport. let's use these standard tools, and now Meetup and Eventbrite and LinkedIn can all have the same event. So you can cancel and collect RSVPs and all this one time consistently, not spend your life trying to figure out which platforms are up to date and which ones are not, and so on. So you can still make Meetup a value proposition for event organizers, but make use of standard calendars so that not everyone has to redo the work every time for the sake of your business model, which is probably broken. Calendars are an obvious way to make community engagements and other such things visible to the public, and they should be. So the users, that's us, can make use of this information in the ways that we want to, as I said, and calendars are the obvious one to work with, but that in one of the ways that we would want to. But a weekly email newsletter that, say, Meetup or some others could construct, and some do this already. Personalized reminder webpage to check whenever an event has been added or removed or changed, etc. Maybe you want to consume it when you feel like it and visit a personal web profile page of some sort. So the event notifications and communications can be the value, but the actual event aggregation and storage and update mechanisms can make use of this very broadly accepted and deployed standard that's been around for decades, and it pretty much works. It could always be made better, but for the fundamental core functionality of when is it canceled? Can you give me a description? Can I RSVP? Who's the organizer? All part of the vCalendar standard. There are only more possibilities nowadays of how to do this, and maybe you even want an RSS feed, or maybe you want to have some AI generated podcast about your calendar. Google Notebook LM can probably do that for you. So the ways that you want to consume your calendar and your upcoming potentially interesting events that you may or may not know about already, all these things are possible when you stop sending people to silos that want to keep them in the silo, not make use of these standards that everybody wants to use. So this all started because I knew my birthday was in June, way back when. And there are only more possibilities nowadays, as I said, and this is one of the things that we are working on as part of the MyMuni project. Actually, technically part of Smart Social, but it's one of those things that's really bothered me forever, and why not try to solve it? In a place as event rich as the Greater Vegas area seems like an ideal pile of chaos to try to wade through and make usable and useful for me, maybe you, others. So that's all for today. I know this is not really an in-depth look back at something, but it's more the source of inspiration for one of the things I'm working on right now. It dovetails off of the About Time episode. Time and calendar is always important. Knowing when I was traveling for Intel, I was able to do my own scheduling. So my own travel itineraries, bookings of hotels and flights, and what happens if this gets canceled, and will I be near here so I can take a short flight over and take advantage of proximity. So calendar awareness, location awareness, schedule planning into the future, that all came in handy. And so really paying attention to calendars and making maximal use of these tools most of us have in our pockets, kind of a no-brainer, which is why so few people are doing this, perhaps. That's where I'm going to leave it. You can hear my voice is already checked out. So take care. Thanks for listening as always, and we'll catch up with you next week. Bye-bye.